Human capital and human development, two different aspects. We are going to have an intrinsic look into it. Human capital. So these two factors contribute for the growth of labor fact. Human capital treats human beings as a means to end. Now this is a very important concept. How the human capital formation will make a greater prospect. Good morning and welcome to the session 4 of human capital formation. We have been seeing the indicators, we have been trying to understand what are the different factors that is actually helping in the economic growth of our country. So these factors, these concepts are actually very important, not just from an exam standpoint, but also from a day-to-day life where we try to understand the implications of human capital in the economic development of the country. So moving forward, let's quickly look together what are the topics that we are going to cover today. So these are the topics for today. Human capital and human development, two different aspects. We are going to have an intrinsic look into it. Human capital formation in India, the great prospects, how our country is really trying to manifest itself into the developing to a developed nation, and we are also going to see what are the prospects that lie ahead for our country in terms of becoming the most advanced economic developed country of the world. So we are going to look into the different factors here and we are going to analyze in the coming sessions. So quickly moving forward, the first thing that we are going to see here is about the human capital and human development. So these two words seem similar, no doubt about it. When you ask people, sir, what is human capital, what is human development, ultimately we are speaking about the same factor. The answer is definitely a yes. Why? Because human capital and human development are almost the same. They are not changing in any different matters. But then where it really matters, that one fine line which I'm going to draw here is that human capital considers education and health as a means to increase the labor productivity. So just keeping two factors here, education and health, I'm going to talk about human capital. So these two factors contribute for the growth of labor productivity altogether. On the other hand, when I'm going to talk about human development, it is based on the idea that education and health are integral, because that's only when people will be able to perform, the ability to read and write, the ability to maintain your health factor. So human development is more a composite index. Why? Because I'm also going to involve certain social factors. So if I have to define human development for you, I would say that education plus health added together with social factors. So when I add the social component also, it becomes the overall human development progress. Now, why this is important for us is that when you look at nations like Sweden, Norway, Finland, Austria, Poland, so many countries of the world, the Western European countries, you will suddenly start seeing that though these countries are very small, they are limited in terms of geographical resources, but they make a rapid progress. They have a better quality of living standards when compared to larger nations like India, China, or Pakistan, or probably even the bigger countries like UK. The reason is that if you try to understand the human development progress that has happened in these countries, is quite rapid and quite fantastic also. Why? Because they have not only given importance to education, but they have also given importance in terms of building in a secured future for their citizens. They want their citizens to live happily. They want their citizens to understand how the economic growth is trying to combine with their day-to-day living, providing you a safe and secured habitat altogether to progress and to live. So that is what India also tried to adapt and try to understand, because if you look at the human capital progress, though we have been making some rapid strides in terms of education, in terms of healthcare, probably in terms of governance also, but we also need to make a lot of changes, lot of improvements that needs to be done in the area of social factors, including sanitation, women empowerment, child growth. So many factors are getting imbibed into the sector, which can make the country an overall well-developed nation. So what we are trying here is that we are trying to combine these two factors, human capital and human development, put together, so that overall in the index of living, India could become probably the most preferred nation in the world to live. So these are the small little things that we keep on thinking in terms of governance, in terms of making country a better place to live in. Now, moving forward, human capital treats human beings as a means to end. Now, this is a very, very important concept which I want you to understand. The end being the labor factor. Using human being, what are we trying to do? We are using human beings like machines. Why? Because we want every single person to perform in India. Now, for example, a laborer works for 8 hours in the day. We are not just considered with the time factor, we are more considered with the factor at the end of 8 hours, how much is he able to produce? So when you have a factory of 1,000 laborers working with you, the ultimate end or the result of calculation lands up in what kind of manufacturing, what is the output quality altogether. So using human being, we are actually trying to measure the productivity. But is that enough? Is that what a nation really wants? That would be $1 million question to answer. Now, moment we start moving in that view, any investment and in education and health is actually unproductive if it does not enhance the output of goods and services. Why? Because if you again go back and ask yourself this question, sir, till now we were talking only about human capital, and suddenly when you try to diversify ourselves, suddenly you move out of the view and start asking this question, is it enough only on productivity? Then you need to go back and answer also this question, that all the investment that has been made on healthcare and education will become unproductive unless and until the labor productivity increases. So at some point down the lane, we need to understand and think on this factor that human capital is definitely important, but a bigger index, a bigger value measurement would be human development. So just the education and healthcare alone will not be able to suffice the growth of India. We need a composite index, we need a system that will be helpful in terms of measuring the growth of India, that will be helpful in making the citizens live a better life in our country. So that is why we say human development perspective, human beings are end in themselves, which means to say that human beings are the source, they are the beginning and they are the end. They are a cyclic function altogether. Right from the birth to the death, the human beings are the source of the economic cycle to happen, because right from birth to death, they are the people who consume the goods, they are the people who manufacture the good, and they are the people who are going to run the nation. So ultimately, the human development concept itself tries to say that human beings are not a part of the cycle, but they are the cycle itself. So that is the most important factor that we have to learn. That's the most important thing that will actually turn around your perspective in terms of learning this entire human capital formation. Now, moving forward, human welfare, this is also what we are going to talk about in terms of the human capital and development. We are also going to talk about a new word called as human welfare. Should be increased through investments in education, health, even if such investment do not result in higher labor productivity. Now, I'm trying to contradict my statement for a while. Why? Because I want you to think with me. Now, for example, you are trying to educate a child right from the LKG level to that of a post-graduation level. But unfortunately, you find that the child is not able to produce the desired result. So can we go ahead and stop the child from learning? Can we go ahead and stop the insurance facility or a medical healthcare facility for the child? The answer is definitely no. The reason being is that Human Development Index tries to make you understand that productivity alone is not the measurement scale. Productivity is definitely needed, point number one taken, but then what is more important is the consistency in terms of providing the benefits that were there right from the origin. So we need to understand this factor that Human Development Index tries to spend time in terms of understanding the human being, in terms of understanding the person and telling him the right thing. It is actually a composite index. So it believes that every single facility, every single factor of life like education, healthcare, infrastructure, social welfare, all these things should be a part of the cycle. You cannot stop the cycle as and when you want. So you need to continue with the cycle. You need to keep moving with the cycle, measure the productivity in a very phased manner. That's why we say that a basic education and basic healthcare is as important as the person himself. So irrespective of the contribution towards the labor productivity, whether that guy is able to benchmark himself in terms of productivity, whether that citizen is able to produce at the levels that are being prescribed or not, but it becomes the duty of the nation to provide him with the basic facilities and amenities. It has to continue. If it gets stopped somewhere, automatically in the entire human life cycle, the entire economic cycle will start coming down. Now, moving forward, human capital formation in India and what are the prospects behind it. As a country, we have always believed that human beings are our greatest asset. And in every single advertisement, in every single aspect of India, human beings are the center. So now let's try to understand in this section how the human capital formation will make a greater prospect, a greater advantage for the nation. Now, we have already learned about the investment in education. We have also learned about the investment in healthcare. These are helping in the human capital formation. That's what is the underlying factor here. We also know that our government is a federal government which has a lot of local governments, the gram panchayats, the district headquarters, and so many factors. We are more of a very structured nation in terms of taken down from the British era, and we have been trying to create ourselves into a better and an integrated nation. So somewhere down the line, we are trying to understand the human capital formation with the structure of the Indian economy so that we will be able to gain further grounds in understanding what are the perspectives, what are the measures that has got in terms of making India better. Now, moving forward, we need to understand the Constitution of India mentions the functions that are need to be carried out at each level of the government. No doubts on this. Why? Because we have the most detailed constitution, most elaborate constitution that has been written by our experts, by our legal experts who have given the best constitution in the world, and this is supposed to be a benchmark. It's one of the longest written constitution in the world. It clearly indicates the levels of functions that need to be carried out by the individuals as well as the respective state governments. Accordingly, what happens here is that the expenditure on both education and health are to be carried out simultaneously by all the three tiers of the government. So when you look at the three tiers of the government, the central government, the state government, and the local, that is the district authorities, all the three people should work in tandem when it comes to investment in education and healthcare. You cannot have a discrepancy, you cannot have a modulation here in terms of doing some expenditure. Why? Because all the three governments believe that education and healthcare will be the primary reason, will be the primary cause for the development of human capital formation. So all the three state governments, all the governments in position will try to do the same factor. Now, I want you to answer me this question when I say, do you know who takes care of education and healthcare in India? Now, when I ask you this question is not something that can be answered in one line. This is not something where I'm trying to ask you an objective type question. I'm trying to make you understand on the factor that India is taking up a lot of analysis to really understand who is responsible for education, who is responsible for healthcare. Many a times the people of India believe that it is the government. Why? Because there is a Ministry of Education known as the HRD, and there is a Ministry for Healthcare. So automatically the Union Minister for Health and the Union Minister for HRD, that's Human Resource Development, is responsible for education and healthcare respectively. It is the governmental norm. So whatever the government does, that is what we are for, and that is what we are inbuilt altogether. But then you need to understand that the government is only an enabler. The government tries to put in certain functions through which the system can be enabled and it can function better. But the government itself will not be the final means of achieving the result. The government will only lay down the policies. The government will only give you ideas. The implementation is still rested at the local bodies itself. So that's why I want you to make this factor very clearly here, that into the need for government intervention in education and healthcare sectors. Government is only looking in terms of providing a 50,000 feet analysis. It is only trying to give you an overall picture that yes, you need to invest in healthcare, in education, in probably social empowerment. So like this, they are identifying sectors and they are making others to start investing into it. But who is going to monitor to the micro level and understand the successful implementation of the program? Who is going to sit and try to make a clear-cut data analysis saying that each and every policy that has been framed by the government of India has truly reached its benefits at the maximum level? So for that, we need to understand that the education and healthcare services create both private and social benefits, and this is the reason for the existence of private and public institutions. So when we look at education and healthcare, both these sectors in India are a primary sector which has been able to contribute to a great extent in development. And both the sectors are flooded with private and public players. Now, for example, in healthcare insurance, the one public sector that you can think about is LIC. But similarly, there are more than 10 private insurance players available in that sector. So you can see a combination of private and public sector trying to contribute on the same line. Similarly, if you look into the education sector, we have central government owned university, state government university, and private university. Then we have deemed university, so many factors, which means to say that on a social contribution level, it is a game that is being played by both the players, that is public players as well as the private players. So both of them believe that there are some benefits by giving education and by providing healthcare to the people. So there is an equal contribution by both the sector, and that's where we see the perspective in terms of development towards the economy. Now, moving forward, the human capital formation also tries to talk about the expenditure on education and healthcare is substantial and they cannot be easily reversed. Hence, the government consider this to be essential. Sometimes we find that there are certain sectors in India. Now, let's say, for example, if we take the defense sector. Now, for the defense sector in India, there's always a priority sector. I'm not saying that this needs to be taken out of the list. But then, compared to education and healthcare, defense is not on the top priority. So sometimes you can lower the budget, sometimes you can change or higher the budget for defense. But in the case of healthcare and education, you cannot make variation. You have to make a continuous investment because the government believes that these are essential factors for growth. These are something which is mandatory for every citizen to be with and grow with. So you cannot suddenly make a rapid change and say that this is done or this is over. On the other end, this needs to be kept, this needs to be well built so that we are able to promote better education, better facilities altogether. So for instance, once a child is admitted to a school or healthcare center, the required services are mandatory so that the child gets the benefit of healthcare, gets the benefit of the education system altogether. You cannot suddenly come back and say that, okay, the child has completed till 5th or 6th, it is enough, let him drop out of the school and start working. No, our aim here is that not to remove education and healthcare, considering it just to be a monetary expenditure. Our aim is that we continuously invest in education and healthcare, make the sector even more stronger in terms of growth and make it popular, make it a contribution towards the economic development. So at any point of time, a reversal or going back in this perspective is definitely not allowed and accepted by the government of India. Moreover, if you look at an individual consumers of the services, they don't have a complete information about the quality of services. Now that's quite true in India. When you go back and ask people about the types of insurance in healthcare, people do not have an idea about it. It is not their mistake. The reason is quite simple, because the awareness is not created in that sector. Now, there are different types of insurance: life insurance, health insurance, general insurance, vehicle insurance. There are different types of insurance that are governing. But what people believe is that insurance is just a backup. In case of emergency, you rely back on the insurance. Now, my question is very, very simple, which tries to understand, which tries to make you on the factor that every point or every sector that has been there in the Indian economy needs to have an awareness level. Then only people will try to understand the benefits of that sector. It is not that we just create and we invest on that sector. It is not enough that we have created large number of private institutions across India, but the question is that what kind of education each of this institution provide, what kind of quality metrics they are involving, so that the student who comes out of this institute is able to contribute for the development of nation. What kind of research and development each and every institution is involved in order to bring in the best results. So there are many questions like this in the education as well as in the healthcare sector, which people need to be aware. That means the information is still not being available at a priority basis, at an accessible level. That is one of the reasons why people think that education and healthcare is not really important, and sometimes they back out from this sector. So the government now feels that in order to keep both the sectors under healthy condition, under the top priority condition, awareness must be created. You need to make the people believe about the awareness factor. So that is why I say in this situation, the providers of education and healthcare services will acquire a monopoly status in a long run. Why? Because there are very few players. So moment you make an early entry and you make things accessible and you fix a price which people are ready to pay and accept you in the market, automatically you become a monopoly in that particular zone and you try to dominate that entire sector altogether. Now, moving forward, the role of government here is also very, very important. Why? Because they are there to ensure that private providers of these services adhere to the standards and they don't charge more than the government factors. In our country, the other problem that you need to understand is the cost factor. For most of the people, every kind of price is not acceptable. You need to have a unique pricing methodology. Now, that is one of the reasons why government plays a pivotal role in terms of providing a pricing methodology or a pricing mechanism. When you go to a ration shop and when you go to a retail mall, the prices are entirely different. The reason is that government sets a standard price and the retail malls have their own marked up prices. Similarly, in the area of education, when you look at the government sector and when you look at the private sector, there is a marked difference. Reason being that government is trying to just enable people by giving them an opportunity at a very affordable cost. Now, when you look at the private sector, they also want to enable people, they also want to provide opportunity, but then they also have their own operating costs. So for them, in order to maintain the operating cost and run with some margin, definitely they will have an enhanced price factor. Now, the role of government here becomes very, very important. Why? Because if you allow just the private sector players to dominate the areas of healthcare and education, automatically things become too pricey, too choosy, and it becomes only for a selective growth of people. So government will try to intervene here, trying to see that this does not become a monopoly and this does not become a one-man show altogether. So what government wants is that they want to fix the price, they want to fix a ceiling, they want to see that every single institution comes well under that particular ceiling. So that is why the role of government in human capital formation is also very, very important. Secondly, the ministries of education and union and state level, they have also started funding up with departments like the UGC, they have also come up with the NCRT, the AITCE, all this kind of factors who have been trying to enable by the government. Why? Because they are boards that have been set up in order to monitor the quality of education, in order to monitor the quality of progress, the research and development that has been undertaken at different levels altogether. So what you see here is that government somewhere tries to come into the picture, trying to provide some roles, some responsibilities with different factors that can actually enable the education to become simplified, that can actually make the education even more easier. So they want to regulate the sector, they don't want to stop the sector, they want to regulate, they want to facilitate so that the human capital formation is accepted at all levels. The next thing is that if you look at the Ministry of Health, similarly when they have come out with the Indian Council of Medical Research, the ideology here is that make healthcare affordable to all. Now there are private hospitals, there are government hospitals. People will always try to compare the facilities and benefits between a private and a government hospital. Now the reasons are quite obvious here, but what does the government want is that the government does not want distinction, but the government wants to see that everybody gets the equal benefit. So they create or constitute a body like ICMR, which overall looks into the different characteristics, the features, the quality of healthcare that is provided, and they try to create accessible healthcare points for the people so that they get the benefit at any point of time. Now, moving forward, in a developing country like India, with a large section of population living below the poverty line. Yeah, we are going to again talk about this word poverty line, a very, very sensitive but yet an important area. Many of us cannot afford access to basic education and healthcare. This is more than a complaint, this is a fact, this is a reality. So when you say in India about 20% of people are living below the poverty line, that's quite a number, because when you are going to do it across 138 crore population, when you say 20% of the people, that's roughly about 27 crore people are not able to afford to basic education and healthcare. The situation is quite alarming, the situation is quite disheartening altogether. So that's why what the government tries to do is that they want to make the section of education and healthcare an open access. They want to provide everybody with at least some basic facility. That's how we look a substantial section of people cannot afford, especially when it comes to that super specialty healthcare or any kind of specific education altogether. So all the higher education specific healthcare products are not meant for everybody. Why? Because there is a huge amount of cost that is involved and every person cannot afford that kind of a lifestyle. What does the government need to do there? If you look here, when you look at the basic education, and healthcare right of the citizen. That's where we want to make it as a birthright. We want to make it a constitutional right altogether. The government does not want to keep education and healthcare as a priority for certain people and not so for the others. They want to make this section, they want to make this as a right for every single citizen. Recently, if you see that, we are now coming up with the Ayush card, that is the healthcare card. Similarly, we have bought out RTI, the right to education, the right to information. All those kind of factors have been bought in so that every single citizen is able to get the basic facilities in terms of education and healthcare. We don't want anybody to be deprived in terms of the basic facilities. We want government to become a facilitator. We want government to open up the sectors, go to the people, make them understand that you are also eligible to take up education, to take up healthcare, so that you are also becoming an important part of this nation in terms of contribution, in terms of development, overall bringing the GDP to the next level as far as possible. So the role of government typically now has become not just a facilitator but also a leader, a visionary in taking forward these policies and programs towards the people. Now, moving forward, both the union and state government, that's where I'm trying to bring in this factor, have to understand the expenditures in the education sector over the years has been done with the objective in mind, obtaining 100% growth. So what the both union government and state government are actually planning is that they want to see that every single rupee that is invested, especially in the areas of education and healthcare, gives out 100% result, which means to say that the rupees that are going to be invested in this sector need to be calculated, need to be promoted only for that particular sector. There should not be any loopholes, there should not be any corruption, there should not be any kind of backdraws that actually pulls the objective out. So what we need to see is that a strict enforcement both from the union government as well as from the state government, trying to emphasize high on terms of education and in terms of healthcare. Why? Because when both of these sectors start performing simultaneously, the labor productivity will go up, the confidence level in terms of a citizen will also go up, and somewhere down the line we will be able to see that the true objective, the true meaning of human capital formation can be obtained. So it is highly mandatory for the government of India to take up this mission in terms of making every citizen aware about his basic rights, especially when it comes to education and healthcare. Now, moving forward, we come to the conclusion of this session. I hope and believe that the session was interesting and informative. In the coming sessions, we will be seeing about how does the human capital formation take to the next level in terms of building up the Indian economy. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today.